So this is a peak experience for me for the Mastering Midlife podcast. I've done 280 episodes so far. Really talked to some amazing people, some people who influenced me in my life, who influence other people, who have done crazy, amazing things, have insights. But this time I get to interview. I'm a little nervous. Like I don't get nervous anymore. And now I'm talking to someone who really means a ton to me. And I may get emotional about this. This man has influenced thousands, tens of thousands of people, but he changed my life. If you listen to the podcast a few weeks ago, the 10 things I learned from Tom Mendoza, you'll know why this is so important to me. So I asked Tom to be on the podcast because he's been a leader for decades. He's changed people's lives. He's built incredible businesses, and he speaks globally on leadership and culture. He's on the board of several companies. He's the former president and vice chair of NetApp, one of the fastest growing tech companies in Silicon Valley history. And now he's here to share with us some of his insights over the decades. Tom, thanks for being here.
My pleasure, Mark. What an introduction. Wow.
Yeah.
Going downhill from here. Geez.
One of the things, my rabbi, Levi Deitch, when he died, he was my best friend, and we had coffee together all the time. And after he died at the funeral, every single person said that they thought he was their best friend.
That's cool. Yeah.
And for me, I know you know me, right? Like all these years, and I know you know me, you care about me and everything. And there's thousands of me's.
Thank you.
I'm curious, how do you do that? You would call people to catch someone doing something right, and you were running a freaking global company.
Yep.
Where does that come from to be so interested in people?
Well, first of all, that's two questions. Where does it come to be so interested in people? I think came from my dad. My dad was his father from Cuba, mother from Ireland. Grew up with nothing. They were both dead when he was 16. Grew up in the streets of New York City. So he enlisted in World War II 2 months after Pearl Harbor at 16. His mother signed the paperwork. He got his finger taken off in a newspaper press that he was working at 16. And she never thought they'd take him, and they took him because they were taking everybody. So boom, he's in World War II. And he was that guy throughout my life that, he played world pitch softball at a very high level, but that's usually sponsored by a bar. Kelly's Irish House was the bar. If he walked in there, he would know every employee, if they had kids, and he would take that time to go see everybody. He didn't necessarily talk to the owner. He talked to all those people. He did something. So he changed careers, Mark, at 47. And Merrill Lynch hired him to be a broker. And they used to only hire kind of kids who went to elite schools, go get your friend's money. And they came out with a program. Let's hire people who've been successful in sales somewhere, but don't have that pedigree, to see how they do it. He was one of the first ever hired. Watched him study, which he had never done in his life, so it's brutal. But he used to do something where he'd read the papers, New York Times or whatever paper, and they talk about promotions. And he would drop them all a note. He'd handwrite a note, read their stories. They love to see people getting ahead, especially if they came from environments like him. And people would call him and go, "Do I know you?" No. There was a track star who tore their leg up, was a girl, tripped over a curb, and her career basically looked like it was over. And we got in a car because my brother was a super fast kid. My brother was a big time athlete. And he took my brother's newspaper clippings, and we drove an hour and a half into the hospital and showed her those clippings because my brother came back to be a professional baseball player. And I'm like, so I'm watching this. And many, many years later, every time someone met my dad, they would talk about what he had done for their life. And I thought, this is what success looks like to me. And to put it on a business level, the groups that I had always led, so I was a sales leader for most of my career, district manager to a regional manager, that kind of thing. First leadership job, I was 26, so I had to learn a lot. But my teams always had an esprit de corps similar to what you experienced at Network, where we were in it together. You know, your team there with Greg Collins and Mike O'Donnell, people loved each other. And it was stressful. We expected high results, but you knew everybody was in it together. And I had that all the time. But none of the companies I worked for had it. I had to shield my people from above me because they really didn't care. They loved them if the numbers were up, and they didn't love them if they didn't. So when I got asked to be part of NetApp right at the beginning, 32, I was a 32nd employee. Dave Hitz and James Howard worked with me at my previous company. They said, we'd love to have a company that looked like what you did in sales. I was like, how good would that be from my perspective? And then when Dan Wormenhoven joined 6 months later as CEO, he said to me, we had our first offsite. I just redid my LinkedIn profile yesterday and told this story. It was in my retirement message when I left NetApp, which over 400,000 people viewed and commented on. And we said, what are we going to stand for? What is it that we're going to do here? And we walked away saying, we're going to create something we're proud of the rest of our lives. Now, that's a very different filter than we're going to have this revenue. And so that to me said, that's going to determine who you hire. Are you proud of them? Are you proud to be on that team with this person? Who you promote critically? So that was, and then the second thing is, going back to why I would call the people. I've always felt that obviously when you're especially in a high growth area, you can always identify problems. That's okay, as long as you come with a solution. Otherwise, it's called bitching. but if you say, Mark, you came and say, we're doing it this way, it's not working. Have you thought about that? I like those conversations, but more important to me was, if you're really asking people to give you their heart and soul and go all in, you got to make sure they know you appreciate them and respect them. So I came out with the saying, catch someone doing something right. Right at the end of 94, beginning of 95, but I couldn't see it anymore. It started to grow real fast, probably 95. And the whole concept was, I said to the leaders, if you see someone do something extraordinary to help NetApp, to help a customer, help a partner, to help society, let me know and I'll call them. And that it eventually became almost, I would say 80% peer-to-peer. I want to tell you about the person sitting next to me. I want to tell you, I just went through training, and this person sat there and gave me their own time because they said they're paying it forward because someone did it for them. And I viewed that as viral culture building, because people, if you say something and people always say, why do you call? Well, there's the lesson of what we're looking for. And I tried to focus on people doing the right things without being told to do it. And we had a young lady in Houston running a seminar, and the guy calls me up and he goes, we had 2 seminars 2 days in a row. The only time you normally notice someone running a seminar is if like the coffee's cold. Right? The food didn't arrive on time. And he said at the end of the first night, she picked up all the food and took it to a car. And I thought, man, she's got a hungry family. And he saw her do it the second night, and he walked over. He said, why are you taking all the food? She said, bring it down to a homeless shelter. And I thought, so I called her. I said, we're trying to do something special here. That defines what I'm trying to figure out how we do. And a closing note on that is, I always was aware that you could treat people poorly and still succeed. Because remember, I came from successful companies, but people was not a part of the equation. But I thought, if we're going to spend all our life on this and we're going to create something we're proud of, what would make me proud? It would make me proud if the people who worked here felt like it was a life-defining experience. If the people who bought from them felt like they were interfacing with a group of people who were committed, happy, and they could trust them. And years and years and years later, people would talk about how it affected their lives, which I've heard you do on your other podcast. So that was the goal.
And, it's so, you always said you had 4 constituencies. You had the people who work there, the customers, your partners, right? And then the shareholders. And I remember that being drummed into us
In that order.
But also being drummed into us
Yeah.
that we care about you, so you'll go out and care about our partners and our customers.
Right.
And that
That's
will
why I
take care
put
of our
it.
shareholders.
That's why I put it at the top. Because Dan Werman over and I had an interesting conversation early on. He said, I think our shareholders should be number one. I said, I just don't. I'm the one saying it, so I'm going to say what I want to say. You say what you want to say. But I think if you do the first three, your shareholders win. If you focus on shareholders, that's what my previous companies had done. You can make a lot of decisions that aren't good at all for the people or the partners or your customers and still make money. That's my point. So I just thought we had an opportunity because of like-minded guys leading it. And I think you would agree. Dave and James are phenomenal people. Dave has James Lau. And Dan, I had a boss that backed me from day one. Never had happened before. You know, we had a small sales kickoff when he first joined. He says, there's only two things we're going to invest in: making a product and selling it. The rest of you better get used to it. But this guy, I'm on his side. And, you know, most engineering guys don't say that to the sales guy. And so I felt, you know, so when I interviewed people, I always thought, is this a person I'd like to have dinner with if I came to town? The answer was no, I didn't hire him. Is this somebody that I really like? Because they may be super talented, but if I'm feeling that, it's my experience telling me there's something not right here. And you might as well, it's like finding a date or a wife. Or you can overlook certain things, but you'd rather have it to where you just really, really like that person in its entirety. Good, bad, but you like them. Start with that. You like them, you trust them, you want to be around them.
It was uncanny that you guys built not only were the people that I work with amazing, but the leadership team. You know, I never heard anybody complain about the leadership team, put down the leadership team. They'd argue with them, they'd challenge them, but nobody ever did that. And when I went to my next company and we were at kickoff and they were complaining and bitching about the leadership team, my sales manager turns to me and says, "Get used to it, Mark. You're not at NetApp anymore. This is the real world." And I was like, "Oh shit!" And I gave my notice. I said, "I'm not staying here."
You remember, Mark, one of the key things we always thought about was candor. Not a lot of companies talk about that because we felt it was important. If you had something to say, you got to say it in a room where that person can talk to you about it. No titles matter, but you could get your feeling expressed. But when that door opens, we don't want to hear that stuff. When that door opens, a decision's made. Now we march. What NetApp was, John Morgridge is a good friend of mine. John was the original CEO of Cisco. He's teaching at Stanford. He was my direct boss at Stratus. And John was teaching at Stanford, and he turned to me. He said, "You know, let me say something about NetApp." He was introducing me. He said, "I don't think they're a great strategy company." It's a great way to start an introduction. He said, "But I do think they're a great execution company." And that's a function of once they make a decision, they go. And there's a lot of trust that has to happen in an organization for that to happen. And if we say, look, we've thought it all, we've heard your input, we've got it, but this is the decision. What I always appreciate, everyone went, okay, woof. And you can fight a lot bigger opponent if you're all aligned, if you're all in it together, you're willing to sacrifice for each other. And I think most importantly, the actions of the people, not just the executives, throughout the organization mirrored that. It wasn't just words. Every company, how many companies say this stuff? How many companies actually do it? You know, when times get tough, when now you're facing a crisis, it's so easy to fall back on what's good for you, not the organization. When I would interview people, I'd say, Mark, look, there are people who might pay you more. Our big competitor, EMC, paid more, but they also have bigger numbers. They're a much bigger company. I said, but this is who we are. We will treat you fairly. You will get compensated well if you perform. But this is an organization that cares. They care about each other. They're going to be there if you have a problem. You know, I'm sure there's stories that you can remember where somebody had a problem and we stepped in to help them. We didn't abandon them. And in a lot of companies, that's not true. Well, you had a very interesting story. I'd never forget you walking out of the water club in Lanai. And, you know, we had maybe met before, but we'd never talked. We just sat there and chatted. And I was like, I like this guy.
Me, you, and Mike Riley on a picnic table, and I had never been to Hawaii. Like I hadn't traveled the world yet. So this was all
Yeah,
new to me. And I was sitting there with the president of my company, and he was just a regular guy. It was really cool. The other thing about, the culture that you talk about now that, this past year with COVID, all the men and women I work with in leadership positions, I used a lot of what you taught this year in making sure that they were making phone calls to
yeah,
their people. And even if it was 5 minutes, the connection and having them understand, because people are self-conscious about who they are. It's not that important that someone hears from me. I said, no, in your position, who you are in the company, you're the CEO,
right.
you're the vice president. A 5-minute phone call from you will be a game changer. You don't know what's on the other end of the phone with people this past year. And it's been so transformational for the
Yeah,
companies that I work with, this past year. And I think a lot of companies have found some of this because of the tragedy of COVID.
yeah, I agree. If you recall, the leadership mantra I tried to live, I didn't come up with it. I think they give Teddy Roosevelt credit, but who knows? But it's people don't care what you know unless you know that you care. And I ask people when they ask me to speak at companies, take compensation aside and tell me how you show people you care. And I've had a room full of executives at a major telco look like I asked them to square root of two, right? Oh, looking around, and the guy goes, I think is you got to keep compensation in. I'm like, you can't come up with any other way that you show them you care other than a paycheck. It was a major I said, what's an average raise here? 3%. Really? And do you deliver that news in person, email, or a note on their chair? He goes, note on their chair. I go, oh, I need a moment. Oh my God, you must be emotional. You got 2% this year. Oh my God, thank you. I said, you have, and remember, you asked me to come in because you have morale issues. I think we're on to something here. None of you even know who works for you. Bill McDermott is a great leader, right? ServiceNow, he was SAP CEO. He called me. There's a book called Contagious Success written by Susan Annunzio. And a chapter in there is on NetApp and me doing this. She's a PhD professor at the University of Chicago, and she was trying to prove that if you treat people well and you care about them, it actually helps your financial results. And Bill read the book. He called me up and he said, how do you find the time for all these calls? I average 10 calls a day over a 15-year period. And my admin would log them all because I want to make sure and check them as I call them because I always send it to him because I want to make sure I don't miss it. I always try to do them that day because you can't get behind if you're going to do that. I said, Bill, how long do you think those calls last? I don't know, probably 30 seconds. You said 5 minutes. 5 minutes is a long call coming in unexpected. Now, they may ask me, they may say, I didn't expect, but it's typically, hey, Mark, I heard you did. First of all, Mark, Tom Mendoza.
Yeah, right. Let me
First
catch my
reaction.
breath.
Oh, no, what happened? Who called him to get? And I say, and this is good news. I heard you did this, this, and this. Just want to let you know we're proud of you. And then to make it into tell me about yourself. So it may go on for 2 minutes of a call when you're not expecting it is actually a long call. So let's say it's 2 minutes, 10 a day, 20 minutes. What I say to people, what are you doing that's so important you don't have 20 minutes? Walking to a call, boom. In the car, boom. And you know what? I got as much more out of it than the other person because I learned about them. And almost always, you said, how did you know so? Well, one of the things people say is, how did you know so many people at corporate if you walked around me? And I'd walk every day when I walked into the dining room, whatever we called it, I would look for someone I didn't know and I'd sit with them. Then other people would sit down because they know she must be okay.
I actually watched you do that several times. I actually saw you walk across a room to someone who was standing alone, introduce yourself without your title, just say,
Yep.
hi, I'm Tom Mendoza. And I've just watched it and said, that's who I want to be.
Yeah, so it really goes back to almost anything. What is important to you? And it was important to me that everyone knew that there are certain companies that when you join them, they put you basically on probation for 6 months, maybe even a year. They want to see if you're going to work out. And if you work out, then you become part of the club. I never thought that was smart. I mean, I don't care what other people do, but if we've taken the time to hire you, I want you successful. I want to help you day one. Tim Duncan. I read an article in Sports Illustrated when he won his last title. And every year he would hold a team meeting and talk about either if they signed a free agent or whatever draft pick they took. And here's one of the best basketball players in the world, legend. And he would talk about, what are we going to do to make sure this person's successful? That's very different. And I think that's the right attitude. People go, oh, we have high turnover. Well, why don't you think it's your fault?
100%
Why is it
responsibility for your team?
right? What are we not doing that? Why are they not successful? As opposed to, I guess it's just bad people. You've heard people say that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I just the way I felt about NetApp over time, especially when we were really in it together for a long time, is I never felt like I interviewed anybody. Meaning I didn't recruit, I should say. I just told them factually what I believe was potential of the company was, which proved true, and also all the challenges. I didn't make it sound easy. And now Mark's sitting there and Joe's sitting there. Mark and Joe are listening, and Joe's thinking, this is not for me. And Mark's thinking, this is exactly what I've been looking for. And I feel like that, and both are right, by the way, but I felt like the right employee feels like they came home. This is what I've been looking for. And
that's what I said.
unique.
That's what I said to my wife after I got my first interview. And Phil Adair told me, "You don't want to work here. You do not want to work here. This is crazy. You don't." And I go outside and I call my wife and I say, "This is really crazy. I am totally not prepared for this, and I can't do this job. And I am going to get this job. I have to have this job." I remember that conversation. I said, I said, "I'm crazy. I won't be able to do it, but I have to have this job."
Like anything else, Mark, work should be an extension of who you really are. You shouldn't have to create a work persona. And I was fortunate that we were creating a company where there was total trust between each other. You didn't always have to agree. That wasn't even the goal. But you knew that people wouldn't disagree to disagree. They wouldn't be disagreeable to make you look bad. They disagreed. That's fine. And then we talk it through and we make a decision and we go on. And watching that permeate the organization, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're a certain type of people are attracted to that. Another part of the culture, which I think worked for me, certain cultures say, look, here's what you're going to do every day, Mark. You're going to get here at 8 o'clock. You can sit at that desk till 9 o'clock. We're going to have a team meeting. We're going to go over everything you're going to do. And then you're going to operate this. You're going to do this playbook till 5 o'clock. And you do that every day, you're going to do great. Well, that may work with a new employee who's coming from college and they're trying to find a new industry. I get that you got to help them figure out what you're doing. But we never thought that was what we wanted. What we wanted to do is say, hey, Mark, here's the goal. Here's what you got to accomplish. Here are the things you have at your disposal to call upon. Executives, coaches, technology. You're not that strong technologically. Here's an SE who can help you, but you got to go. So at the end of the day, we expect you to go figure out how to go get that goal and tell us what you need. And it's like a kid who does well in high school when everything structures and falls apart when they go to college because now they have all this free time. They don't do the right things. But there are other people who blossom when they get into a role. Like, wait a minute, people trust me here. It's okay to say I don't know, like you did when you first came. You go, I don't know any of this stuff. Okay, we didn't think you did, but you now have to commit to learning it. Here's the resources you have at your disposal. And there's a trust and a belief both ways when someone does that work. And they have a different view of themselves by the time it's over. And the organization says, that's what we thought was going to happen. We knew he's a good guy, so we hired him.
So, over the years, how has it evolved for you? Because you always expected, high output work. It was tough stuff being in
Right.
technology then and now. How has it evolved for you supporting people for the long haul, for longevity in a high pressure situation? What do you look for, and how do you help people to really look at the horizon rather than the short-term goals?
What I do today is I'm on boards, right? I'm on 3 boards. all doing very well, all high growth situations. Which is, and one of the things is, if you're not in the day to day, like you're not in day to day, you advise people. And first of all, you find you know stuff that's different because people go, "How do you know that, Mark?" Well, it's experience. And so I have experience of having built a lot at NetApp, and what I learned at NetApp was very interesting to me to do with people who don't work for me. And so I'm on the board of directors of a company, and I'm almost always involved with their sales leadership and sales people if they want me to be. And when you take one step removed, a lot of the stuff that we learned and did is very valuable coaching for someone else who's not in their chain of command.
Mm.
So I have a lot of former NetApp people still ask me to, I don't want to call it mentoring because that's too formal. But when they have issues, they call me. Is there any chance I could talk to you? And they describe a situation that they're facing in their new company. And they find it valuable, I guess, because they keep doing it. And I find it valuable because I'm not in the business.
Mm.
You're not in the business of the people you're coaching, but all the things that you have experienced and seen work or not work. So a lot of times they'll say, "This is what I'm doing," and I'm saying, "Well, let me tell you how that would hit me. If you came into me with that rap, it would not work. And here's why. Have you thought about doing it this way?" And they're probably in a situation they can't say that to someone inside without looking weak. They don't want to show that they don't know what they're doing. I had a super high up executive at Oracle. We had a dinner in Silicon Valley, me, him, and our sales guy. He ended up he had 10,000 people under him at Oracle. And when the sales guy went to the restroom, he's turned to me and said, "Can I ask you for a huge favor?" I said, "Sure, what is it?" He said, "Can I get together with you every 6 months? Just me and you. And maybe have a phone call in between. Because you've said more things that are resonating, but I can't say anything in front of your sales guy. I'm not going to say that means something to me. And I definitely am not saying that within Oracle because it'll be perceived as weakness. But to have somebody say to me what you just said and let me tell you what I'm going through would be huge, which is what you're doing for a living now."
People pay me to say things to them that other people won't say to them because they're in leadership positions.
And maybe it's because they're in the chain of command. They don't, there's politics involved, whether you call it that or not, but I get it. But I've found it very interesting and rewarding to be able to have conversations with people. If I have conversations with people and they never actually take action on it, at some point I say, "Look, there's really no point in me talking to you. You've asked me 3 times, bro. You've done exactly the opposite of what I said, and it didn't work." And now you're going, "I should have listened. I should have listened." I'm not telling you got to do anything, but I'm sure I'm not the only person giving you advice you're not listening to. You're basically stuck, and all you want to do is complain. That's not that interesting. If you really think, and don't just use me, bounce it off people, but I'm unhappy in my job. I really can't stand what I'm doing, and you're still in it 3 years later. I can't help you.
Here's another thing you're a living example of, is the fact that when you're interested in people for as long as you have been and you've made an impact on people, and as you retire and you less and less have hands in the actual businesses, your relationships, people will be calling you and you'll be vibrant and interactive, until in your 90s. People will come and sit with you and want to get your insights on things. And that richness is what I think is what that third, fourth act is. And you get to live that.
My wife and I got to meet Charlie Rose. We were on a friend of mine was a well-known entrepreneur. He's a well-known angel investor, I should say. And he brought a yacht to New York, and he was hosting a lot of entrepreneurs from New York that he's invested in. But Charlie Rose came on the yacht, and I've always liked Charlie Rose. I'm sorry that he ended up getting in trouble and all that kind of stuff. But as a show, I thought his show was I would not miss it. I mean, he'd have Shimon Peres on one night, next day, all these incredible. And he had done the work, and it was just a great conversation. And I said, so I got to know him. We had dinner together. Got to know him. He lived right across from me in New York City, actually. And I said to him, "Look, how did you get started? I understand now you're Charlie Rose. You can call anybody in the world to be on your show. well, how did it start that people even cared about you? Kind of like Ed Sullivan in the day. How did he become a guy? And he said, Tom, I had a radio show in North Carolina. And it really comes down to, I've always thought the most interesting thing in the world was a conversation between two people. That's how I feel. So Mark, I lived in New York the last 10 years. I'm kind of a COVID refugee right now. But I love New York City because I so many random meetings with people where you start a conversation, you learn something, they learn something. I have some great friends that I met just like that in a restaurant. They happen to be sitting next to me, and you just start talking. And so one of the great things I like to do in life is go to dinner with friends or people that I dislike, whether I know them well or not, and enjoy that evening. You get so much out of it. And there's no ask. I'm not doing it for a reason but your life becomes enriched by knowing a lot of interesting people and their story. I love knowing people's stories. At the end of the day, I think there's nothing more interesting than seeing someone who's comes from virtually nothing in some cases to unbelievable things. It's not just the achievement. It could be just, teachers, nurses, things they do are just astonishes me. But it's how did this whole person come about?
I remember I do remember a story of you meeting someone random who always dreamed of going to a Notre Dame football game. We never had the means to be able to do it, and you didn't know them out of the blue, and you took them to your 50-yard line.
We were sitting in a bar at Notre Dame, South Bend, Indiana, and we're having fun. There's 24 of us, and these four guys seem like a lot of fun, so I'm buying them drinks. They were from Canada, and I say, how'd you like the game? Oh, we loved it. I said, where were you sitting? Well, we didn't get in the stadium. I said, what do you mean you didn't get in the stadium? No. We drove here. I think they drove 10 hours. We drove just to be in the environment. We've never been able to get tickets. I said, have you done this before? Oh, yeah, we've done it a number of times. And you've never been in the stadium? No. Canadian people. So I said, well, look, I have 4 tickets on the 50-yard line. You can use them I'll use them one game for like this, but you can use it for any game you want. Todd was the main guy's name. He still contacts me. He follows me on, I'm sure he'll watch this. And we had so much fun with that night. And then they followed up and they did it. But I had a t-shirt created. There's a famous t-shirt for a Notre Dame football game when we played Miami in 1980. It was Catholics versus convicts. Very famous. There's been a 30 for 30 on it. We were facing Tennessee, and I made a Catholic versus Clampett shirt. Guy Sports Illustrated the next week said some wise ass alumni. I walked in the pep rally, people went crazy. Anyway, that shirt hangs in the bar at a place called Tap House on the Edge right now, signed by me and the Canadians from that night. It's over there, cash register.
That's so cool.
It's just a privilege to be in a spot where something small act of kindness can mean so much to somebody. Why wouldn't you take it?
Right, and does way more for you than it ever did for them. That's the
I'm sure, Mark, you do the same thing. It's not a matter. It was nothing, but it's a privilege in life to be in a spot where people really care what you think, and a small act of kindness means a lot to them. Or maybe it's somebody I know can do that small act of kindness. I had a friend of mine, his father. We always tailgated an orange van. And my friend Eddie Gibbons and John Gibbons, their father, huge Notre Dame fan. And right before his 70th birthday, Joe Montana is a friend of mine. I got Joe Montana to come to NetApp and do a video. Never forget, says, Ed, I got a bone to pick with you. I understand you're a Giant fan. He's talking to Ed Senior. And they did that video for him, which was, it was fun for us to do, but incredible for the family to experience. Things like that are, if you can do it, do it.
Incredible. Well, Tom, thank you for spending time I appreciate it. I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and traveled the world on my training for coaching and leadership. And I learned as much organically and teach as much organically of what I've learned from you the years I got to work with you and watch you. So thank you for everything you've done for me.
Well, I am not at all surprised by your success. I thought you were special when I first met you. You went through a lot of stuff, but I'll tell you something, you're very, very good at what you're doing. Really good. I've been watching some of your videos. You're just very, very good. I'm happy for you, man.
Thank
And
you.
if you want me back on another time, we have a second chat, you let me know. I'll do it.
If dude, I got about 4 hours of content I'd love to get out of you. So if we got you, you know your way back here. There's a few, there's some very specific leadership and cultural things I would love to talk about.
Sure.
So thank you.
Happy to do it.
All right, Tom, thank you again. I appreciate your time and your attention. Stay safe and healthy. To everybody else, you're precious to me. I love you. Take care of yourself. Have a great rest of the day.